Welcome to Regeneration, a podcast about reimagining Jewish customs in a modern world. I'm Debs Weinberg.
And I'm Eileen Levinson. And we're here to help families, friends, and chosen families revive customs with authenticity, creativity, and joy.
From Shabbat candles to everyday blessings, discover how you can weave new and old practices together across the generations to bring the people you love closer.
Hey Debs, I know you do yoga pretty regularly, but as someone who's so invested in Jewish ritual, is there anything about your yoga practice that you infuse with Judaism?
Well, one of the things that I do think about in terms of making it Jewish is that I think about breath. There's a saying that you can't say God's name. And the reason that I feel that you can't say God's name is that I actually think that it is breath. So if you think about the inhale and the exhale, you actually can't be speaking at the same time, but you're saying the name of God. And breath is all about life. To me, that is really bringing God in, that breath and that intentional breath. Anyway, that's my meditation practice, that I bring that in as I'm breathing through yoga.
When I think about meditation, I was so intimidated by it before I really had teachers that I felt were explaining it in a way that made it really approachable. And ultimately, it's just breathing, and it's just quieting your mind to watch and listen to what's happening.
Yeah, I think that that's the intention, that as you're breathing, that you're taking a pause because you're so focused on your breath. And so I see that similar to Shabbat, which is also taking a pause. I would say that my meditation also becomes a Jewish meditation when I'm thinking about, what am I being called to do, or how can I bring more kedusha or holiness into my everyday life, or when I'm thinking about what I'm grateful for. I think that also brings my Jewish neshama, my Jewish soul, into my meditation practice. Eileen, I wanted to ask you, we had just heard from Rabbi Dana Sorokin, who talked about 3 good things. So I wanted to ask you, tell me 3 good things that's going on in your life.
Well, one thing is sleep. I went to bed at 8 o'clock last night. It was so good. And for those who know me, I had probably a year of not sleeping through the night with a newborn and baby and all the things that go along with that. And so I've been sleeping a lot lately, like really, really deep, relaxed sleep. So sleep is one. My son started a new nursery, and he is a really smiley, happy kid. And it's nice to see him very smiley and happy there. And I picked him up today, and there were many stories about how he just was warming their hearts and enjoying all the activities. He's a flirt. He knows how to work his charm and get all the folks at nursery to smile with him. And a third good thing, well, my mom is finally back home after recovering from a long illness and finding care to support her at home. And so she is very happy to be home, and she and my dad are both happy with the care that we found her at home. And I think we're all breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief that we have a system that seems sustainable for now.
Eileen, now I know why you're getting a good night's sleep.
Thank you, Debs. Focusing on those 3 good things, it reminds me how important it is to take that pause It's so easy to convince ourselves that we just don't have time. And even if we're not actively in the middle of doing things for our busyness, sometimes our minds can take on almost a sense of vigilance, feeling like worry is productive, that if we're not worrying about them, we're not looking after loved ones in some way. And of course, that's not the case. We're looking after them the best that we can. But taking a break to breathe and find our anchors, as we mentioned in a previous episode, it's not just important, it's necessary.
I think that finding and remembering those 3 good things each day is somewhat of a meditation. Our guest today is Josh Feigelson, a person who I've been listening to every day on his own podcast. He creates space this week for the sacred through ritual and meditation. Rabbi Josh Feigelson is a PhD. He's president and CEO at the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. He's someone who came to his own meditation practice and whose Jewish life has shifted into a practice of mindfulness and intention. His is a deep, soulful Jewish learning, and it all starts for him at 5:15 in the morning.
Josh, it's great to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a delight and a pleasure to be here.
So can you tell us about your journey in the meditation, mindfulness world, how you got to the work that you're doing today?
If you had told me probably 10 years ago that I would be not only leading the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, but also teaching meditation and have a podcast on Jewish mindfulness and stuff, I would have probably laughed at you. Because while I had many good friends who were into this kind of spiritual practice, I always considered myself, I'm an intellectual and I can admire what they do, but I kind of live vicariously through that. And so I can see now actually that there were seeds planted much earlier for me, where I think that mindfulness for me took the form of ethical behavior and focusing on my own sort of integrity. And I remember actually the very first thing that I would consider a retreat that I went on was about 20 years ago. It was in a higher education context, and it was out on Whidbey Island, and it was hosted by a couple of people who were really working on the theory of emerging adulthood. And they brought together a pretty interesting ecumenical mix of people to reflect on that. And I was working in Hillel at the time. I started out as the rabbi at Northwestern University Hillel. So I think this was in 2008. And we had this gathering where for the first time I experienced a group of people, they were very Quaker infused, where they read poetry, and there were these long periods of silence, and people were invited to sort of reflect slowly. And I remember going into a meditation room. It was just an open room with a wood floor, and being alone there on Shabbat morning. And I think that was the first sort of seed that was planted. Oh, you could do it this way. You could be this way. And especially the invitation to poetry, I realize now opened up something for me. And I've really come to believe in the importance of, we spend so much of our time in prose, and maybe this is the musician in me too, and that's not often where a lot of our most meaningful moments happen. Most of the meaningful language that I'm aware of is actually poetry, or is poetically inspired prose. And so I think those seeds were planted, and they really got activated for me. My father passed away in December of 2018. I was working in a job that was very prestigious and also clearly not the right fit and not the place that I really wanted to be. I decided to leave that job at the University of Chicago. And I realized that my good friend, Rabbi Sam Feinsmith, runs the clergy leadership program, or was on the faculty of the clergy leadership program at IJS. He had always been nudging me, you should come do our program, you should come do it. And I said, no, that's not for me. And then I realized, okay, now's the time. So I called Sam and I said, okay, Sam, I think now's the time. He said, great. And I applied for the program and I got in. And so I went on my first retreat with IJS. And in the months leading up to that, I did our online course that's an introduction to Jewish meditation called The Gift of Awareness. And I remember trying to sit and meditate for a minute And it was excruciating, right? To try to be alone and quiet with my mind. And over time, though, that just grew. And I went on this retreat and it was transformative and unbelievable. And it was 5 days and meditation and really soulful prayer and studying Hasidic texts and doing yoga and stuff that I never would have imagined myself doing. And the job to be IJS's executive director had come open and I had already applied for it. I remember coming home from that retreat and saying to my wife, like, wow, if they offer me this job, I'm totally taking it because this was the most amazing thing that I've ever done. And that's then how life worked out. And so now I'm someone who has a daily meditation practice in the morning. My Jewish life has really shifted to being, I would say, doing a lot less of the Siddur, but doing what I do with a lot more intention and awareness.
I'd love to hear more about the daily practice. And you write about feeling deeply at home in this soulful Jewish living. So
Yeah.
what can you tell listeners what that feels like? What does that look like?
So my meditation practice is I'm usually up by about 5:15 each morning, and I have my coffee, and I try to press play on a meditation app that I use by about 5:30 and have a half an hour sit. And that's just like in my kitchen. I sit on a meditation cushion on a chair, which is good for posture. And sometimes that can be like an open awareness, just being aware of, calming my mind and being aware of what's going on. Sometimes it can be about cultivating a certain aspect, could be chesed, compassion and loving connection, or there's any number of ways to take a meditation practice. But that's become a really sort of basic grounding part of my day. When I go to synagogue, when I go to shul on Shabbat morning, I go to a modern Orthodox synagogue. And usually what I do is I go and for the first 20 minutes or so, I put on my talit and then I sit. I do a meditation sit, and it's while other things are going on. But I'm just trying to really ground into my breath, into my body, being at home, like really being at home in my own life. And I think so much of our life is so fast moving, and so much of our life also takes place on a screen, right, which is like outside of our body. And so the gift of giving ourselves, being able to turn our gaze back inwards, like on our own experience, on our bodies, on our minds, all this stuff that's inside, that's like this first step that then allows me to be more open and grounded, and then to participate in the davening. But like for me, I spend the first 20 minutes doing that while everybody else is doing whatever they're doing. And then I say the Shema slowly. And then I say the Amidah, slowly. And that's pretty much my morning routine. So, it's really changed my own practice and my relationship with that tefillah ritual, for sure.
So, Josh, we've been taught through rabbinic tradition to pray in a certain way. And so although Jewish practice has evolved, I find that people are also resistant to change what the rabbis have taught us. So how do we give permission to create a practice that works for them?
Well, look, I went to an Orthodox rabbinical school. I went to Yeshivat Chofetei Torah, or YCT, and I graduated there over 20 years ago. And one of the things that I'm really grateful about having gone to YCT is that I have the tools and the education to understand, like, what is this ritual really trying to do? Like, what's the essence here? Because one of the byproducts of having such an old tradition as we have, as we're blessed to have, is there is so much stuff that has accreted around the rituals. And, it's like on Sukkot, right? One of the key rituals is to shake the lulav and etrog, like to take the lulav and etrog with you, right? And that's the main thing. So, but what do? First, we say, well, we want you to do that with intention. So the rabbis came up with, let's make a blessing so that you will have intention for when you shake the lulav and etrog. But then along come, somebody else, who says, well, Actually, we want to make sure you also have intention for the blessing. So we're going to add up this additional paragraph. Hineni muchanun umzuman. Here, behold, I am, prepared to fulfill this mitzvah. And then I'm going to say the blessing, and then I'm going to shake the lulav. And then, no, that's not enough. Then you have to have like intention for the hineni muchanun. So, and I want to link up the divine presence and the divine name. And by the time you're done with it, like there's so many layers to this thing. They lost the main thing, which is like, just take the lulav and etrog and be present with that, right? And it's hard because like there's all these beautiful things and you want to, and there's so many layers and there's so much richness and you don't want to discard any of it because it all feels precious, especially after the Shoah, right? It's like, and I think that mindfulness practice is great at this. If you're constantly grasping and holding on, you're never going to be open enough to actually experience the thing that we're supposed to experience. The giving ourselves permission is really about feeling able to let go so that we can actually recognize what's essential here.
I appreciate that from the Jewish perspective, and especially as someone who is thinking about how do we use design to facilitate storytelling? How do we help people get to the essence of ritual that is really, I think, empowering for listeners to hear? And then from the flip side, you're introducing, particularly in your work, the idea of mindfulness. And we, perhaps with certain generations, that has stuck more. I'm wondering, what challenges do you see that people bring up when they come to a mindfulness program with you, or when you mentioned your work bringing in mindfulness? Do you get pushback? Do you get people saying, well, I just can't, I've tried to meditate, I just can't?
So we get a few different forms of response. I mean, one is there are people who are like, this is Buddhism and it's another tradition and you shouldn't do it. And my response there is, first of all, thanks to the work of, frankly, a bunch of Jews, including like John Kabat-Zinn and other people, Western mindfulness has definitely been secularized and made into a set of tools that then we should feel welcome and encouraged to plug in and use in our tradition. Second is, the response there is, frankly, so much of what we do at IJS is about the idea, the realization that we have our own indigenous versions of so many of these practices, right? It's not like the idea of meditating and quieting the mind. You don't think that we had Jewish versions of that? We have those, right? Especially in the Hasidic tradition. But you can go all the way back to the Mishnah 2,000 years ago, and they're talking about the pious ones of old, right? So already in that time, they were like feeling like, wow, we don't do it even right. But like the pious ones who were really old, they used to wait a long time. It says an hour, not literally an hour, 60 minutes like we do because they didn't have clocks. But like they waited a significant period of time before they entered into prayer. So we have that within our own tradition, and we're really just recovering tools to be able to do that.
I'm curious, especially since you started working at IJS at a time, it has probably been intense nonstop, starting right before or during the pandemic. So you're starting in 2020, and the world has changed over and over since then. What have you seen coming up in the people that are coming to IJS? How have you seen the interest changing, people's relationship to Judaism and to mindfulness changing over the past 5 or 6 years?
I just got back from a retreat, actually, that we run every year for some of our major supporters. And there's one woman there who's in her 80s, who lives in South Florida, who was a spiritual seeker during her life, but who had very little by way of Jewish education. We'd started during the pandemic. We started a daily online Jewish meditation set live Monday through Friday at 12:30 Eastern. Still going to this day. Probably 500,000 participants have participated at this point. We still get several hundred people every day who log on live at 12:30 to close their eyes together for half an hour. She had found us somehow during the pandemic and then proceeded to start doing online courses with us and participating. And one thing led to another, and she's become a major supporter of ours. This was her first retreat. She came on this retreat just now. And she told me, she said, like, I have learned more about Judaism in the last 4 or 5 years from being part of IJS than I learned in my first 75 years as a person, which is both an indictment of the Jewish education and Jewish life system that we currently have, but also like was flattering to hear. But it was an example. I mean, and there's so many people, no matter their age, I think we've found have really been thirsty and longing for a form of Jewishness that just really was centered on contributing to my flourishing as a human being, to helping me deal more compassionately with the suffering and difficulties of life, because life is going to contain plenty of that. And that can help us live more joyfully and intentionally and all of those things. And so thankfully, I mean, the pandemic, by forcing us to go broad and digital, because we couldn't do retreats for a couple of years, it really opened up so many people now who have like found this. When I started at IJS, we had about 8,500 people, I think, on our mailing list. And today we've got close to 40,000, and so it's just grown, enormously. And I think that's true definitely it's true for a lot of older people, empty nesters. That's our core demographic. I like to refer to as, Ashkenazi, synagogue affiliated Jewish women over the age of 55 and men who can cry. And that has now started to also reach, younger audiences as well, very intentionally into parents and into young adults, where we're doing a lot of work in both of those spaces. So we're seeing a lot of thirst that I think we're helping to quench. And I think there's lots more room.
Is there a particular piece of Jewish text or Jewish wisdom that you find inspiring?
I think one that rises to the top that I really love these days it's a Hasidic teaching that's found in a number of different places. One version that I like to teach is from Rabbi Menachem Nachum of Chernobyl, who is a student of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism. And the teaching it actually became the title of one of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks's books called The Letter in the Scroll. That there's a midrashic tradition that there were 600,000 Jews, 600,000 Israelites who left Egypt. That's the number that was recorded in the Torah. And there's a midrashic tradition that there are 600,000 letters in a Torah scroll. Now, you have to suspend disbelief for a moment because that's not actually true. The number of letters in a Torah scroll is about half of that. But for the sake of this poetry, that there are the same number of letters in a Torah scroll as there are what he calls root souls of the Jewish people. And that every one of us has a letter in the Torah scroll. And so that teaching is meant to then say, like, every one of us has a place in this tradition, right? Every one of us has a piece that is a place where we are grounded, where we're rooted, where we belong, where we can and should feel at home, right? And Shabbat actually is the time of regrounding in that. Another Hasidic master, the Sfat Emet, loves to talk about how Shabbat is this time of reconnecting with our roots, with those spiritual roots. The shoresh is the Hebrew word, right? And so the shoresh HaNeshama, the root of the soul, the root of our spirits. Shabbat is this time where we create this moment by acknowledging it, of saying, you know what, life isn't all about all the striving and all the doing and all the screen time, for sure, right? It's actually about getting in touch with this much deeper aspect of our existence. And in doing that, it's like, wow, you can feel those roots going way, 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 way down. They're really deep. And when you think about grandparents and parents and raising children, all of the research indicates the more we can help to model and demonstrate resilience, right? Yeah, there's going to be up times and there's going to be down times, the whole teaching about the sine wave, right? And knowing that there are cycles, and on Shabbat, we get to re-experience the depth of those roots. And so I think that's enormously important and powerful, and that's what makes it one of my favorite teachings.
I wanted to ask you, because we've been talking about play, improvisation, and then also in the beginning talking about your very structured origins, both with your ordination and with your musical background, what to you is the intersection between ritual and play and structure?
Play can't exist without structure, right? You have to have rules of the game. And if you don't have the rules, then there's nothing interesting that can happen. So you have to have some structure, even free verse poetry, right, still has rules of language that it's playing. It's working in a language, right? And so it's playing off of certain expectations around how language is supposed to work or associations it makes. So without question, my very favorite Haggadah is by a French rabbi scholar named Ouaknin, Marc-Alain Ouaknin. Ouaknin. He actually has a whole thing there about play and structure and how the Seder, the order, the structure of the Seder, right, of Seder night, is then an invitation into play, right? Because we make a whole big game of hide and seek with the afikomen, or we make the game that happens, in my family, this is the biggest night of the year, is looking for the chametz, putting out 10 pieces of bread around the house, and we do the scavenger hunt. And even now, my kids as teenagers, it's still a big deal. And so we have this play, we're playing with language, right? That so much of the Haggadah is about actually word association and word games. And Jews excel at that, obviously. That's like the rabbinic version of fun. Rabbis love puns. Dad jokes are terrible, and rabbinic dad jokes are the worst, right? So I think there's such an expectation of playfulness and a need for playfulness, and ritual is an invitation to play. And I think actually that's exactly where so much of it breaks down, is when we get ossified, when we're so worried about are we going to do everything right? It goes back to what I said before. If you know what we need to do, what's the essence here, that gives you more freedom to improvise or to be playful. I think that's the other thing, is it's also having a playful attitude towards it, a lightness about it, rather than this needing to be heavy and somber, or we're just going through it because it's a tradition. That's a quote, Tevye. So I think play is essential. There's just a joy and a lightness, and yes, there should be laughter and there should be smiles and there should be good feelings. That if it's not doing that, then something's wrong.
I know we have a few minutes left, and I did want to ask you, you have a teenage kid and kids in college. Are there any specific rituals that you find particularly meaningful with your family at this age?
It is still definitely always meaningful, I think, to all of us, doing the priestly blessing on Friday night. I know that that's meaningful to my kids, and it's meaningful to my wife and me. I mentioned before the ceremonial scavenger hunt for chametz the night before, for bread the night before Passover. That was a big, I think it's emotional. It's emotional for me because it's something I really associate with my dad. I think particular rituals, building the sukkah together and sitting in the sukkah is a big one for us, I think, for our family. My children have been fortunate that they've had day school educations and gone to Camp Ramah in the summer. And so they have a Jewish literacy about them that I didn't have as a kid, where, every family, you have your family language that you speak. And our kids, they will invoke Jewish language in just totally unexpected and, playful ways. So one morning recently, Toby, who's 13, comes downstairs and he's like, "What's up, Kitanus?" He's just drawing from two words in the Hallel prayer, right? Which is part of the Seder, but also part of the regular, part of the service. And he just picked these two words randomly, to just throw in there just to be playful. And why he decided, I don't know. And actually texted my other kids. It was like, do you think other families do that? Because my other kids would do something similar to this. It wasn't the first time this had happened. But I was just like, do you think anyone else does this? And they said, no, this is just us.
We're all about encouraging our listeners. We want people to feel that they have the permission and the tools to create meaningful moments in their lives. And for somebody who wanted to create space this week for something sacred, whether that is through creating their own ritual or a simple ritual practice, what might you suggest for them to try out?
I can give a plug for my own podcast.
Sure.
The episodes are 10 minutes long, so they're very digestible. Called Soulful Jewish Living. But I would start, if you don't already have a ritual around the Shema. It's 6 words, and 2 of them are the same. And so it's really just 5 words. If you're not a Hebrew speaker, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And I think that just having a ritual around that is in many ways probably one of the most accessible. I'll give you 2. I'll give you a wake up and a go to bed. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So traditionally we recite the Shema at bedtime. And I think just taking a moment before going to bed to, here I would encourage some kind of meditation, just calming and grounding. My mother's advice, which was her mother's advice before getting married, was never go to bed angry. So even if you're not married, just don't be angry about anything. Going to bed is a good thing. So calming, letting go, and then reciting those words and experiencing, maybe having an intention of experiencing a sense of love and support and something guiding you into sleep. I think that could be really lovely. And then in the morning, the customary ritual is that the first thing that we say is words of gratitude, Modeh ani lefanecha, right? That we're grateful for being restored to life after a night's sleep. And the emphasis on the first words that we speak being ones of gratitude, the word modeh is I'm grateful, or modah, is related to todah, which is gratitude, but is also related to Yehudah, the name for where Jews come from. Yehudah is Judah, Jews. And so implicit in who we are is orienting to gratitude. And so starting the day with a gratitude ritual upon waking and going to bed with its own kind of gratitude ritual at night. I think, if everybody in the world did that, we'd be a lot better off.
Amen, amen, amen.
Thank you so much, Josh.
This is great. Such a pleasure. Thank you for doing this.
What I find so interesting about Josh's Jewish journey and his professional journey is that he comes from a place that was so structured. Between his studies of music and conducting in college and becoming ordained through an Orthodox rabbinical school, all of these are really structured elements. And then he goes to Institute of Jewish Spirituality, where essentially he's stepping back and making space for silence and for quiet and listening. And we think about conducting, which is so much about creating, or at least being the conduit for somebody else's creation and leading a group of people to make that music together, to meditation, which for me is really about not creating and taking a break from feeling like we have to do so much, to really taking a step back and realizing I need to just acknowledge that there are things in this earth and in my mind and spirit that I have to just listen to and watch. I was thinking about this quote, music is the space between the notes. This idea that Josh was so focused on the notes and the rhythm, and then actually now he's focused on that space between.
Eileen, I love the way that you framed that. It's finding that space between the notes.
I really also want to lift up what he was talking about with Jewish tradition, how there's so much adding on to Jewish practice. Jews over the years were so excited about how we could celebrate life and make meaning, and they're all yes-anding each other. And then there's so many layers of Jewish practice that it becomes overwhelming and perhaps rigid. And we're not necessarily looking at the reasons why some of those rules or practices came into being. And maybe those extra layers of it cause people to miss the context entirely. So what meditation offers is an opportunity to strip down all these extra layers and get back to the essence. Our guidebook this week is going to focus on the Shema. It was really beautiful how Josh offered that as a intro meditation practice. So we're going to offer some activities and some writing prompts and some context for you to dive deep into the Shema and listening.
You know, today we had some technical problems, and I was thinking that almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. I think Anne Lamott said that, but I was thinking about that especially today.
Yeah, agreed. So let's all unplug the Shabbat.
Yep. So this Shabbat, I'd say let's be mindful by unplugging from work and screens and remembering those things that matter the most. And our relationship, our friends, our children, and our grandchildren.
This first season of Regeneration is a 10-episode journey. We invite you to join us every Friday to explore new ideas for Jewish ritual, hear from an inspiring guest, and receive tips to practice on your own. You can visit us at recustom.com/regeneration to download all of your guidebooks, see the episode list, and sign up for our newsletter so you stay up to date on everything happening with Regeneration.
Regeneration is a partnership between Recustom and the Jewish Grandparents Network,
and is hosted by Eileen Levinson and Deborah Weinberg, and produced by Josh Gilbert and Kate Mishkin.
Follow the Regeneration podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back next week. See you then.